Welcome to the Bookworm Duo, where we explore a variety of books. Let's get started.
Today we're diving deep into Percival Everett's James, a novel.
Oh, this one's been on my list. I've heard so much about it. And actually, one of our listeners specifically requested a chronological breakdown of the plot.
Ah, yes, excellent choice. It's a wild ride, that's for sure.
So before we get lost in all the twists and turns, can you give us a little context, like
Ah.
when was this book published? And what's Percival Everett all about?
All right, so James, a novel came out fairly recently, just last year in 2024.
Okay, so it's still pretty fresh.
Yeah, and Percival Everett, he's a really fascinating author. He's got this amazing ability to blend humor and social commentary. And this novel, it's a prime example of that.
Interesting. Okay, I'm even more intrigued now, so let's dive in. The book opens with James. He's a slave in pre-Civil War Missouri, right? And he's just waiting for his daily ration of cornbread. Seems kind of mundane, but
Yeah. Right, but it's in these everyday moments that Everett really reveals the tension of life under slavery. Like, James is obviously intelligent, he's insightful, but he has to play this role, this subservient role, just to survive.
yeah, I can see that. So it's like right from the start, we get this sense of like quiet defiance.
Exactly. And in chapter 2, that defiance starts to come out more directly.
Wow, how so?
Well, he uses storytelling to scare off these white boys who are bothering him.
Clever.
Right. And even more risky, he starts secretly teaching slave children to read, which obviously was hugely dangerous.
Yeah, the punishment for that would have been awful.
Absolutely. But these acts, they show us that James is determined to hold on to his humanity. He refuses to be completely broken by the system.
That's so powerful. And then we meet Huck, a young white boy who befriends James. I'm curious, how does their friendship play out given the time period and their vastly different backgrounds?
It's interesting. Huck's innocence, like his genuine curiosity about slavery, it really highlights the vast differences in their lived experiences.
Yeah, like one lives in ignorance, the other in constant fear.
Exactly. But their friendship also brings in this element of moral complexity to the story. Like, it shows the potential for connection across racial lines, but at the same time, you can't ignore the power imbalance.
It's that constant tension, right, of
Mhm.
hope and reality.
Mhm.
And then, boom, the whole story shifts. James overhears Miss Watson, who owns him. She's planning to sell him downriver.
Right. And that would mean separation from his family, potentially forever.
I can't even imagine the fear.
It's a terrifying prospect, and it pushes James to make a desperate decision. He escapes.
So that's where the real adventure begins.
Absolutely. His escape sets off this chain of events that just ripples through the rest of the novel, and it forces him to confront not just the physical dangers of being a runaway slave, but also, like you said earlier, those deeper questions of identity and freedom, what it really means to be human in a system that denies your humanity.
And in a surprising twist, Huck decides to run away with them. They flee on a raft down the Mississippi, and that's where things get really interesting. Like, we've got wrecked steamboats, storms, close calls with slave catchers. It's a lot.
It reads almost like a classic adventure story.
Yeah.
But Everett uses these familiar elements to explore deeper themes. He throws in humor, irony, social commentary, always reminding us of the absurdity of their situation. Like, here's a runaway slave and a boy everyone thinks is dead, both outcasts in their own way, and they're relying on each other for survival.
Talk about an unlikely duo. And then, in the middle of all this chaos, we discover something remarkable about James he can read.
Yes, he finds these books on the wrecked steamboat and spends his nights, like, devouring them by candlelight. For him, reading becomes this symbol of freedom. It's something nobody can take away from him.
Oh, that's such a powerful image, like knowledge as a form of resistance.
Exactly. And it allows him to connect with this wider world of ideas beyond the limitations of his immediate circumstances. It gives him hope.
But their luck doesn't last forever, does it?
No, it doesn't. They run into Huck's father, Pap, who, by the way, is a pretty awful guy.
From what I remember, yeah.
Yeah, he's abusive, suspicious, and he immediately zeroes in on James, especially the fact that he can read. They manage to escape him, but then their raft gets hit by a steamboat and they're separated.
Oh no, so that's a major turning point.
Huge turning point. James is alone now, facing even greater dangers. And we really see him having to dig deep, to find the strength to keep going.
I'm already feeling anxious for him.
Yeah, it's a tense moment. But he eventually finds this community of escaped slaves hiding out in the Illinois woods.
Oh, so a glimmer of hope.
Right. They offer him shelter and support, but he's torn. He wants to stay with them, but he also desperately wants to find his family.
So, another impossible choice.
Exactly. And it's here that Everett really dives into the moral complexity of the situation. There are no easy answers for James. Every choice comes with risks and sacrifices, and we see him grappling with loyalty, his desire for freedom, that deep longing for his family.
He's carrying so much.
He is, and ultimately he decides he can't abandon his family, so he leaves the community and heads out on his own again. And wouldn't you know it, he bumps right into Huck. During the Grangerford-Shepherdson feud, no less.
Oh, wow. What are the chances?
It's crazy, right? But it speaks to this theme of fate and circumstance that runs through the novel. Their paths just seem to be intertwined no matter how hard they try to separate.
It's like they're bound together by destiny, in a way. And then, to make things even more complicated, they get mixed up with those con men again. The Duke and the King. Remember them?
Oh, how could we forget? Those two are trouble with a capital T.
Exactly. And they drag James and Huck into all sorts of schemes. This is where the novel gets really satirical, right?
Absolutely. Everett uses the Duke and the King to expose the hypocrisy of Southern society. It's hilarious at times, but also incredibly sharp and insightful.
So it's like laughing through the pain.
Exactly. And then things get even more absurd. James is actually forced to perform as a singer in blackface for a minstrel show.
Oh, wow. That's,
It's a lot, right? The irony of a black man having to disguise himself to portray this ridiculous caricature of blackness, it's both funny and deeply unsettling.
yeah, like a twisted commentary on how race and identity were perceived back then.
Exactly. The audience is completely oblivious to the truth, which just highlights the absurdity of it all.
And the chaos of that whole minstrel tour nearly leads to James being discovered. He barely manages to escape with Norman, one of the band members.
Right, and Norman claims to be a black man passing as white, which adds this whole other layer to the novel's exploration of identity. Like, they're both playing these roles, blurring the lines between race and performance. It makes you question how we define ourselves and how society perceives us.
It's deep. And then they hatch this wild plan to sell James back into slavery.
I know, right? It seems crazy, but they're desperate to get money to free his family. It's a risky move, morally ambiguous, but it shows just how far they're willing to go.
Yeah, like the ends justify the means, even if the means are super messed up.
It makes you question where the line is, for sure. And of course, their plan leads them to all sorts of strange encounters, like they meet a giant woman.
Wait, a giant woman.
Yeah, it's bizarre. She just appears out of nowhere. Maybe she's a symbol of the unknown or the unpredictable forces at play in their journey. Whatever she represents, she definitely adds this element of surrealism to the story.
It keeps you guessing, that's for sure.
And then, in another twist of fate, James ends up at a sawmill owned by a man named Henderson. And let me tell you, Henderson is not a nice guy.
Uh-oh. I have a bad feeling about this.
He's brutal, cruel, the embodiment of everything wrong with slavery. He represents the constant danger that James faces, the dehumanizing nature of the system.
So another obstacle in James's path.
Yes. But it's at this sawmill that James meets Sammy, a young female slave who disguises herself as a man to avoid Henderson's advances.
Oh, no. That's awful.
It's heartbreaking. But her story speaks to the vulnerability of women under slavery, the lengths they had to go to protect themselves.
I can only imagine.
And James, seeing his own daughter in Sammy, he decides he has to help her escape. So they flee, along with Norman, who's returned at this point. And their escape, let me tell you, it's harrowing. They build a raft, they avoid dogs, they're constantly looking over their shoulders. It's a reminder that the fight for freedom is never truly over.
Even when you escape, the fear never really goes away.
Exactly. And tragically, during their escape, Sammy is killed.
Oh, that's so sad.
It's a devastating loss, and it's a reminder of the real cost of this fight for freedom. But James and Norman, they manage to make it onto a steamboat, but of course their relief is short-lived.
I bet. Something always seems to happen.
Right. The steamboat explodes.
No way. Are they okay?
Well, it's chaotic, there's fire everywhere, people are screaming.
So much for catching a break.
And in the midst of all this chaos, James is separated from Norman.
Oh, no. Not again.
It's a moment of pure uncertainty, mirroring the upheaval of the coming Civil War. But amazingly, he survives. And guess who he finds amidst the wreckage?
Huck.
Huck.
Wow. Talk about resilience. So they're reunited again.
Yes. It's a moment of hope amidst the devastation. It shows that their bond is strong, their desire for freedom even stronger.
That's heartwarming, in a way.
Yeah.
But knowing this book, I doubt it's smooth sailing from here.
You're right about that. They head north, hoping for safety, a new life. But along the way, James has this surprising encounter with Judge Thatcher. He's a figure who represents, the hypocrisy of the civilized world.
Oh, I remember him. He was like the epitome of respectability, but also totally blind to the horrors of slavery.
Exactly. And this confrontation is a real turning point for James. He confronts the judge about the sale of his wife and daughter, demands to know where they were taken. He's not holding back anymore.
He's done being silent.
Absolutely. And Judge Thatcher, he's completely shapen by James's knowledge, by the fact that he can read, that he's capable of challenging him.
The power dynamic has shifted.
It has. And James, he's not letting up. He basically forces the judge to help him find his family.
Wow, that's intense. So he's taking control of the situation.
He is. He's no longer just reacting, he's acting. And that determination leads him to a group of slaves being transported to a breeding farm.
Oh no, not that place.
The very place where his wife and daughter were taken.
This is heavy.
It highlights the cyclical nature of oppression, the constant threat of exploitation, and it pushes James to make another daring decision.
Which is?
He decides to help them escape.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
He's risking everything for these people he doesn't even know.
He is, and it's a testament to his transformation. He's gone from a man seeking his own freedom to a leader fighting for the liberation of others.
What a powerful moment.
Right. He uses his intelligence, his courage, and he pulls off this incredible escape, setting them all on the path to freedom. It's a triumph against all odds.
So what happens next? Does he finally find his family?
That, my friend, is a story for another time. Welcome back to our deep dive into Percival Everett's James, a Novel. When we left off, James had just, killed the overseer Hopkins.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. I mean, I get why he did it. The guy was a monster, but it's still a tough thing to process.
Right. It really makes you think about, what does justice even mean in a system that's so fundamentally unjust? Is revenge ever truly justified?
Yeah, it's a big question. And I feel like Everett doesn't give us easy answers, which is what makes the book so compelling.
Absolutely. It's not black and white. It's full of these gray areas, these moral dilemmas that just stay with you.
So where did James and Huck go from there? They're still on the run, right?
They are. And that act, killing Hopkins, it kind of hangs over them as they continue north. They eventually reach Quincy, Illinois. It's right on the Mississippi River, and they're hoping to cross over into a free state.
So close to freedom, yet so far. It must be incredibly frustrating.
Oh, it is. And on top of that, they still can't let their guard down. Even in a town like Quincy, which was known for being anti-slavery, they're still in danger.
Makes sense. So do they manage to cross the river?
Well, they decide to split up. James goes to look for a boat, while Huck tries to gather supplies.
That seems risky.
It is. But they're running out of time, and they need to act fast. But while James is searching for a boat, he comes across this group of children playing a game, and it chills him to the bone.
What kind of game?
They're pretending to be slave owners. They're, bidding on each other, using the same language, the same dehumanizing language that James has heard his whole life.
Oh, wow. That's heavy. Even kids are caught up in this system.
Exactly. It shows how deeply ingrained slavery is in the culture, It's not just about laws. It's about whole way of thinking, a whole way of seeing the world.
Yeah, it's insidious. And meanwhile, what's Huck up to?
Well, this is where things take another turn. Huck runs into, you're not going to believe this, the Duke.
No way. That con man.
The one and only.
Oh, man, that's not good. He's going to cause trouble. I just know it.
Of course he is. And he does. He basically tricks Huck, tells him this whole elaborate story about James being a dangerous runaway who kidnapped him, and he pressures Huck to help him capture James.
Oh, no. Poor Huck.
Huh.
He's so easily manipulated.
He is, but he eventually, he comes to his senses. He feels so guilty that he confesses the truth to James.
Thank goodness. He's finally learning to think for himself.
Right, and it's a huge risk, but it shows that he's starting to develop his own moral compass, which is a really important step for him.
Okay, so James figures out the Duke's plan.
Oh, he does. And let's just say he's not too happy about it. He confronts the Duke, forces him to reveal where his family was taken.
And where were they taken?
To a breeding farm near Edina, Missouri.
A breeding farm.
Yeah. It's a stark reminder of how slaves were seen as nothing more than commodities, objects to be, bought, sold, and bred for profit.
It's just horrific.
It is. And James, knowing this, knowing his family is being held at this place, he sets off for Edina, leaving Huck and the Duke behind.
He's going alone.
He is. It's a dangerous move, but he's driven by this desperate hope to save his family.
I can't even imagine what he must be going through. It's like every time he gets close to freedom, something pulls him back into danger.
You're right. It's like this constant struggle against these forces that are determined to keep him down. But as he gets closer to Adina, he encounters a group of slaves being transported to, you guessed it, that same breeding farm.
Oh, man. That's got to be a gut punch, seeing these people, knowing what awaits them.
It is. It's a moment of like intense emotional conflict for James,
Hmm.
fear for his family, anger at the injustice, and also this glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he can do something to help.
So what does he do?
In a truly courageous act, he decides to free them.
He does, like right then and there.
Yeah. He leads them on this desperate escape into the woods, knowing that he's putting himself in even greater danger.
Wow. He's incredible. He's like transformed into this freedom fighter.
He has. And it's a powerful moment because it shows that he's not just running anymore, he's fighting back. He's taking a stand against this whole system of oppression.
Welcome back to the Bookworm Duo. We're finally here, the last part of our deep dive into Percival Everett's Jane's A novel. When we left off, James had just pulled off this incredible escape, freeing all those slaves headed for that breeding farm.
Right. I mean, talk about a gutsy move.
Seriously. But now what? He's still got to find his family, and I'm sure things are about to get even more complicated.
Oh, you can definitely count on that. This is Percival Everett we're talking about.
So where does this wild ride take us next?
Well, from here, the story takes on this, like, almost mythical quality. We're talking folklore, philosophy, you name it. James has these encounters, these experiences that really blur the line between reality and, well, something else entirely.
Okay, now you've really got me intrigued. Give me an example.
For instance, he runs into a talking dog.
Wait, what? A
Yep.
talking dog?
Yeah. And it's not just some random quirky detail. These encounters, they all serve a purpose. They make James, and us as readers, question what's real, what's possible, what it truly means to be free.
So it's like, through all this absurdity, Everett's getting at some pretty deep stuff.
Exactly. And the whole time, James is still driven by this deep desire to find his family. He's faced so much loss, so much pain, but that love, it's what keeps him going.
So does he find them?
Well, I don't want to spoil the ending for anyone who hasn't read it yet.
Okay, fair enough. But can you at least give us a hint?
Let's just say that the ending is both unexpected and incredibly powerful. It leaves you with a lot to think about. It's not a neat and tidy resolution, but it feels real, you know?
I like that. It leaves you with questions, makes you want to discuss it with other people.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this book so special. It's not just entertainment, it's an experience. It's a journey through history, through the complexities of race and identity, through the very heart of what it means to be human.
Wow. You've really sold me on this one. I'm definitely moving it to the top of my reading list.
You won't regret it. It's one of those books that stays with you long after you finish the last page.
I love when that happens.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you so much for taking us on this journey through Percival Everett's James A novel. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have too.
It's been my pleasure. It's always a joy to talk about books that really make you think.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe for more bookish adventures and hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to share the knowledge, spread the word.